Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus. My co host Phyllis Zimler Miller cannot join us today. At mid July, the New York Times published an essay by the Israeli professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University, Omer Bartov, in which he states that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. 2 months earlier, the Dutch leading newspaper, NRC, interviewed 7 genocide experts from 6 different countries who came to the same conclusion. Israel denies the allegation of committing genocide. Public opinion increasingly goes in the direction of genocide and asks for punishment of Israel and Jews. We discussed this with Thane Rosenbaum, who is a law professor and distinguished university professor at Touro University. He's the legal analyst for CBS News Radio, and he's also a novelist and essayist. His most recent book is titled Beyond Proportionality, Israel's Just War in Gaza. Thane, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you for inviting me, Evelyn. I'm a big fan of your podcast. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So, Thane, could you please start with educating us about the term genocide? Is it a legal term? Is it a scientific term? What does it mean? And what are the criteria?
Well, it's a relatively new crime, as is international law. It was created, essentially by a Polish Jewish lawyer right before the end of World War II. And if not for the Holocaust, we wouldn't know the word genocide. That's the irony. Before the Holocaust, it didn't exist. So, for instance, the Armenian genocide that Turkey committed during World War I was not referred to as a genocide because the word didn't exist. Mass killings, mass murders, you heard that, but you never heard genocide. Shortly after World War II, when the United Nations was created, they passed what's called a convention on the prevention and punishment of genocide. What is a convention? Conventions are different from resolutions or declarations. Conventions are contracts. That says a bunch of countries get together, we sign an agreement. We say, we're not going to do this. Here's what this is. We're not going to do that. Declarations are just aspirations. Wouldn't it be nice if this happened? Or resolutions. Conventions are contracts. This is what we obligate ourselves to do. And they defined genocide very clearly, which is a specific intent to destroy in whole or in part a group of people, whether a racial group of people, an ethnic group of people, a national group of people, a religious group of people. Its point is specific intent to eliminate a people, right? It has nothing to do with war, which is why what's so preposterous about the use of genocide here is that in no other war in which even civilians were killed did anyone, including the International Court of Justice in the UN and The Hague, ever charge genocide. Why? Because it's a war. And in war, people get killed who are civilians, and they're called collateral damage. Why are they called collateral damage? Because their death is collateral to the main aim. What's the main aim? To win a war, right? So yes, there are dead people, and that's why they're collateral damage. Genocide is the exact opposite. There's nothing collateral. It's the whole point, right? That you're there for one purpose alone. How do we know what's the best example of that? The Holocaust. The Germans went to a meeting in what's called the Wannsee Conference. The leading judges, prosecutors, people that worked for the Nazi Party. And in a meeting, they created essentially what was known as the final solution to the Jewish question, meaning, yes, there's World War II, there. And here, there's another war, a war against the Jews. And the purpose is to eliminate the Jews. And that's a specific crime. It has nothing to do, we're going to create concentration camps, we're going to create gas chambers. It has nothing to do with what we're doing with the British Army or soon the American Army. So by definition, genocides don't really happen during wars, and the International Court of Justice doesn't bring it only even in the Bosnian genocide, which people refer to as a genocide, the International Court of Justice said only the Srebrenica massacre was a genocide. All other civilians were killed in war, right? And that everyone thinks, isn't that a genocide? Well, no. Legally, and the international community only recognized the Srebrenica killing, the massacre of civilians, as separate from the actual war. But in other instances, when you're dealing in an action of war, now here in Israel and in Gaza, Hamas started a war of aggression on October 7th. No one denies that. That's the actions of barbarism and a war of aggression. Israel, under Chapter 51 of the United Nations Charter, was allowed to engage in self-defense and establish deterrence. And it is attacking Hamas and trying to eliminate the threat and to deter future threats. And why does that matter? Because Hamas, even today, says that they will continue to do October 7th to Israel again and again and again. They use the words again and again and again, which means this is what our intent is. So Israel has the legal right under the laws of war to do whatever is necessary to eliminate the threat and to establish future deterrence, right? So everything Israel is doing is in the context of a war. So the word genocide, which is an extreme, loaded, provocative word, and which is why it's being used, Evelyn, it's being used because it's so provocative, it's so off the charts, it's so extreme that we don't even use it for other times when civilians are killed, because they're not killed with a specific intent to eliminate a people, right? As opposed to a specific intent to eliminate terrorists who fight next to people, who use human shields, which are war crimes, by the way. Nobody seems to worry about that. Nobody's saying, wait a minute, Hamas is committing war crimes. They're fighting a war next to people, and they're taking hostages. That's another war crime. So that you have war crimes committed by a terrorist organization that no one wants to talk about. And you have collateral damage that Israel is creating in Gaza that is perfectly acceptable under the laws of international humanitarian law and the laws of armed conflicts. Totally acceptable. It's terrible. It's unfortunate, but it's expected and understandable. And those deaths are being called a genocide.
So back to the Holocaust. The intent was very clearly and documented as well documented as you just explained at the Wannsee conference. The intent was to eliminate every Jew on earth, and that's where the term originates from, right? From the Holocaust, the term genocide.
Because again, its purpose is civilians.
Yes.
Its purpose, it has no military necessity.
Right.
The Jews no were military necessity.
Right. The Jews didn't form a military threat to the Germans.
They did not gang rape German girls. They did not behead German babies. They did not mass murder Germans. They were not. The Nazis were not engaged in acts of self-defense. They were engaged in acts of genocidal intent. The Jews, there was nothing that Jews did that prompted a war against them. This was a war against them, which was not a real war. It was a genocide. It would be a real war if Israel was if Jews in Germany and throughout Eastern Europe were fighting back, right? If they had a terrorist organization fighting for them, if they had an army. They were simply civilians in every country in which in which Germany invaded. There was no Jewish army to fight. They were just rounding up civilians. It wasn't until the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which is at the very end, that Jews were even fighting back with whatever they had, bottles and rocks. So there was no war ever. So that's why it's a separate, it's easy, it's very simple to think of the Holocaust because it's so easily distinguished a war against the United States and Britain and a war against the Jews wherever they live.
So, although the Holocaust happened during World War II, it wasn't a war, it was a genocide. What Israel is now doing in Gaza is a war, a military war, um, in, um, um, in response to an attack by Hamas on Israel. And so you're saying the criterion for a genocide is the intent to eliminate a whole people who are not a threat. And that is different now in Gaza. And so what happens in Gaza doesn't make the criteria for the term genocide, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and in fact, wars come with rules. There are laws of war. People don't know this. There's a long history of the laws of war, and there are military rationales, military doctrines of what you can do and you can't do. Mm-hmm. And the general standard is, are you engaged in a just war, right? Are you responding to an act of aggression? Israel is. And are you engaged, are you fighting the war justly? That's the second question. Is your conduct in any way committing war crimes? What are you doing? Now, I could make the argument that Israel has committed no war crimes. But if there is a question about what's happening in Gaza, the question is a war crimes question. It's not a genocide question. So the whole question of genocide should have been always off the table. Even the International Court of Justice, when it did its preliminary review of Gaza, said this is not, it's not plausible for it to be genocide. Literally, the former president of the ICJ said, her name is Donahue, said, just to be clear, we have found no acts of genocide because by definition, Israel's fighting a war. We understand the difference. But war crimes is something else, and it's a much lesser evil. So you could see what's happening. You libel Israel and libel the Jewish people, blame them for the worst crime on earth, right? Go with the top, as if words don't matter. We all know that words matter. And progressives now say that words are violence. So if words are violence, to say you committed genocide, the screaming of genocide, to me is a moral crime. What do you say? What did you just call me? Genocide, right? I think the Western world, decent people should be standing against this and saying, whoa, 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 genocide. Are you sure you want to use that word? That can't be more extreme. There's so many lower words like war crimes and ethnic cleansing and mass murders, right? There's other things you could say. But the reason they shout genocide is to shut everyone else up with the conspiracy. Let's pick the worst thing Jews did, and let's look at it this way, Evelyn. Let's pick the thing that happened to them, the crime that was invented, the word genocide was invented for a crime that happened to them, and let's now say they're doing it. Let's now say that...
In a way, it's Holocaust inversion.
Exactly. They're saying it's an inversion, saying we're not even interested in what happened to you anymore. We're going to say whatever happened to you, you're now doing it to the Gazans. And so now it's a wash. Stop complaining about a genocide because you're doing a genocide. So it's strategic. The people who use the word genocide, Omar Bartov is not a legitimate scholar. No legitimate scholar would have written what he wrote. He knows this is not genocide. And you know how you know this? His essay was nonsense, literally nonsense. Why? Because he tried to tack on things that are not definable as genocide, like the displacement of people. That's not a part of the rules of genocide. He literally said, this is so crazy, and people aren't challenging it. It's madness. He's saying, even Israel's establishing of humanitarian corridors is genocide. Why? Because it's forcing people to move from one place to another place and from another place to another place. The movement, the acts of precaution to prevent their deaths, to him is genocide. That's how crazy he is. how illegitimate he is as a scholar. He also says what? The destruction of buildings. What? Where do you get this? Show me where in the definition. Remember, we said it was a contract, right? Where in that contract, in the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, you're making stuff up. You're taking advantage of the fact that most people don't know anything. And you have the audacity to say, I'm Jewish. You're really not. No legitimate Jew would say this. I'm an Israeli. You're really not. No legitimate Israeli would do this. You know, you've completely turned the world against your own people by lying, by saying, if you destroy buildings, you're committing genocide. Mm-hmm. If you kill too many civilians in war, it's a genocide. No, it's not. He made it up. As I said before, when you're in a war, you're not in a genocide. And when you're in a war, you could commit acts that are wrong, but they're not called genocidal. They're called war crimes, crimes associated with war. But he knows this. He knows this. He's laughing at the world by saying, I'm just going to make stuff up and say, if you knock down buildings, you committed genocide.
Yet Thane, there are several other scholars.
I wouldn't call them scholars.
Well,
I would call them Jew haters.
These are,
researchers
from World War II.
No. Even Bartov said that he was surprised that Holocaust scholars did not sign up with him. Why not? Right. So when we're talking about, don't say World War II scholars, because those people are Holocaust scholars. They've studied genocide in the context of the Holocaust. None of them, I think only one worldwide, not one of them has said this is a genocide.
In Holland, there is a very well-respected institute that researches World War II, and one of the leading researchers there said. He had the following arguments. He said, because there are reports of over 100,000 dead Gazans, many of which are women and children, because there are reports of the withholding of food, water and shelter and sanitation, and I combine the arguments of several scholars here, because there is massive displacement of Gazans who have nowhere to go, and because members of the Israeli government talk in a derogative way about Palestinians, taking these elements together makes it a genocide. What do you think of these arguments?
It's ridiculous, and you should put them on your show and embarrass them. Or you should put them on a show with me and I'll embarrass them. I'll make it easy for you. They invented a new crime. They're saying it makes it. They're literally saying what you just read to me is saying, we're going to connect some dots. We're going to throw this on the wall and that on the wall and that on the wall. And if we throw that all on the wall, individually, none of that amounts to anything. They would represent something much, 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 much less than genocide. But if we take them all together and we stitch them together and we put them in a soup, then we invent a new crime. And I say to you, Dutch scholars, who are you to invent a new crime? What makes you so special? I'm not impressed. Let me start up with, I look at you as a clown, right? You've made something up, invented. I'm going to go invent something. You're supposed to be a scholar, and a legal scholar or historian. A legal scholar or historian says, no. There are rules. There are definitions. What are the definitions? And what are the rules? They don't say things like what you just said, not your fault. Nonsense. I'm going to say this, and I'll throw this, and I'll throw this.
Yeah.
And all together, it's a genocide. I'm saying none of the countries that signed the Convention on the Punishment and Prevention of Genocide saw any of that. They didn't write that. They could have invented, made up stuff like that, but they didn't. The problem with your Dutch scholars, whoever they are, they know they don't have the right definition, but they hate Jews and they hate Israel. And that's their problem. They're stuck with a definition that doesn't apply to Gaza. They're stuck. And so they figure most people are stupid. They don't know anything. We'll just say, first of all, derogatory things. Seriously? Derogatory words? You mean I can say a derogatory thing about a people? Is that the same thing, Evelyn, as the Wannsee Conference?
Well, now, I mean, I agree with you that Israel is not committing a genocide, that there are reasons, war reasons related to war, to
Yes.
destroy buildings, to displace people, to
Yes. It's obvious.
yes, that there are
Obvious.
that Hamas uses
And you should ask the Dutch scholars why they don't conclude the obvious. The obvious. Your definition doesn't fit. You've made a new crime. You've invented a new crime, and guess what? You gave it the same name. At least give it a different name. Can you be even original? This is how clownish they are. It's how stupid, ignorant, Jew-hating that they're going to say, we're going to invent a new crime and we'll call it the same as the old crime.
Right.
But let's go back to the word derogatory. Hamas engaged in barbarism. They beheaded people. They gang raped teenage girls and watched boyfriends witness it, gang raped. And then they shot machine guns into genitalia. Some of them even raped the corpses of Jewish girls. Raped the corpses. Do I need to say anything else? They burned babies alive. Derogatory words. You're upset about derogatory words. The leaders of Israel can't speak derogatorily about the Gazans. No country was attacked like this. If wherever you're in Europe right now, I think you said Sweden. If anyone came to, are you?
Switzerland, yeah.
Switzerland, sorry. I know there's a difference. Sorry.
Yes.
If Finland did this, and came and gang raped, mutilated vaginas and breasts, beheaded, burned babies, just ask yourself, you can't say something derogatory about the people? Because if I say something derogatory, that means I'm committing genocide? Really? As I said, the Wannsee Conference is pretty clear. Its purpose was to establish specific intent to kill civilians, right? Instead, we're saying, oh, no. Israel doesn't have to do that. All we need to do is quote a few upset generals, a few a prime minister, a defense minister who says a derogatory comment, calls, you know what he did? Some of them called Gazans human animals. Oh my God. They are human animals. I just said it. I gave you what they did, right? To me, that's the definition of a human animal. That means they've committed genocide because they defined what happened on October 7th as barbarism. Did we hurt the feelings of the Palestinians?
Well, I think the way it is, I think the way it is viewed by these scholars is
clowns.
I think the way that it is viewed is that not that Israel should not respond to October 7th, but that there are factions in the Israeli government and politics that don't want the Palestinians to live there.
So what?
They want them
so what?
They want them.
It's not a crime. So what?
Yeah, so they see it.
So there's some people. There's some people in Switzerland right now that have views that would not be accepted by Evelyn Marcus and her friends. There's some people have views. They're noxious views. Some people have noxious views. Now you call Switzerland committing genocide because there's some people who think that we should kill the Finnish people. So what? So some people don't like Palestinians and they said it publicly. Is that the Wannsee conference?
Well, they say again.
Yeah, I understand.
So they say, combined with the fact that there were many casualties, that there is
many casualties. Sorry, many casualties, as I said, is not definitive of anything in war. In war, the number of casualties are not definitive, and we don't know, since we're only relying on the statistics and the numbers of the Gaza Health Ministry. Even the United Nations isn't confident that Hamas is providing accurate information. So the many casualties, first of all, I don't think there is many, but it doesn't matter. The same clowns who you were citing in Holland, and I hope they hear this, clowns. There are 6 million Congolese that have been killed. Are they spending any time on that? 300,000 Tigrayans in Ethiopia. Anything on that? Any genocide on that? 400,000 Darfurians in Sudan. Anything on that? 1 million Uyghurs in China are being forced sterilizations, abortions, murder, concentration camps. Anything on that? I call them clowns and Jew haters because they're only interested in this. They're only interested in this. Why would an academic who's supposed to be in the truth business only be interested in this? Unless you're saying, well, I like the idea of engaging in libelous language that foments violence against Jews. I like that. I like to do that. I'm an academic. I don't really have a job for a living. I don't do much. I'm a petty bureaucrat with a PhD, and I want to cause trouble. And the best way to cause trouble is to show people my PhD. I'm going to show you I have a PhD, and I'm going to scream the words genocide. And I'm not going to tell you that I just invented a new crime. I'm not going to tell you that I'm putting pieces together because I don't have the crime itself. It's a problem. I got a problem. So I'm going to just say, if you add it all up, and I'm saying, all right, derogatory words, that's not criminal. The number of Hamas, Gazan people, if it's criminal, it's a war crime. I don't trust the numbers. The UN doesn't even trust the numbers anymore. And the people are complicit by aiding and abetting Hamas and voting for a terrorist organization. And they're being killed as human shields, and people get killed in war. So the 100,000 by itself, it could be 1 million. It wouldn't change if you're fighting a war, you're not engaged in a genocide. Unless you talk to these Jew-hating Dutch academics who invented a new crime.
What do you say of what they do is in their reasoning is combining several factors? And
it's never been done before.
That creates the picture of a genocide.
Do you want to do that with other crimes? Do you want to do other things like that? Evelyn, are you comfortable with that? If I look at a car and I look at it the wrong way, that means I stole the car, right? Do you want to make crimes up? It's not exactly that. You didn't actually steal the car, but I don't like the way you looked at the car. So I'm going to say you stole the car. Do you like that idea? You want to live in a world? You want to live in a world where a bunch of clowns from Holland get to make up a new crime on their own? On their own. They're not even doing this. This is why they're clowns. And I hope they watch this because they need to be embarrassed. They should be ashamed. They're not even saying this, Evelyn. We got a problem. We're very upset what's happening in Gaza. We need to, as an academic group, go to the United Nations and make a proposal that we change the Convention on the Punishment and Prevention of Genocide and modify it to reflect these new realities. We need to change the law in order to call that Israel a genocide. We have to change it. We feel very strongly that we need to combine these other elements, that you need to patch them together. But we don't want to make it up. So we're going to go there. We're going to try to convince the world to sign a new convention in which if you have a lot of people killed, it's a genocide. If you say derogatory things, it's a genocide. If you move people from place to place, it's a genocide, even if you're trying to save them. If you destroy buildings, it's a genocide. We need to change the law. We're not going to insult Evelyn Marcus and just pretend that we're speaking as academics, because as academics, we know we don't have the elements of the law, of the crime. We don't have the elements. So they're not doing that. So they're engaged in something else. They're engaged in sophistry. They're engaged in manipulation. They're engaged in libel and defamation, but they're not true academics because, again, there are genocides that are actually happening right now involving not 100,000, but 300,000 Tigrayans, 400,000 Darfurians. Where are they on this? I don't hear them. They're not interested in this.
Is there another in another country that you know of a situation post World War II or maybe even recently that has been officially branded as genocide?
No. In fact, as a matter of fact, no. And that's what's really crazy, because people speak of the Cambodian genocide as a genocide. I think it is, but legally speaking, it wasn't treated as that way. Even the Rwandan genocide, which, if you ask me, that's a genocide, but because it was in the context of a war between the Hutus and the Tutsis, the Hutus and the Tutsis, because it was in the context of war, to me, it's a genocide. But unlike your Dutch clowns, I don't scream the word genocide. Why? Because I'm a law professor and I'm a real law professor. I'm not a clown. So I'm going, look, I can't help the fact that these mass killings were committed in what looks like a civil war. And if it's in the context of a civil war, you're not going to get the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, because they know the law, they know the rule. And yes, I understand, Evelyn, that South Africa and Ireland have brought an action against Israel for genocide in connection in the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. But there's been no ruling. And I seriously doubt there will be a ruling of genocide. You know why? You know why?
No, why?
Because if the Dutch government will put these clowns in jail, your academics, if they tie your hands, the Dutch hands, to say, wait a minute, you're saying now if we're in war with another country and civilians are killed, they're going to get us for genocide? Because of you? Because you hate Jews so much, you made up a lie about them, and now we can't go into war? If we destroy a building, Holland is now committed genocide? If we say derogatory things about the Swiss, we're in genocide? What are you, crazy? Get a job. Get a real job. Do something for purpose for the Dutch people, because you just bound our hands, and the rest of the world will not sign that convention, Evelyn, for that reason, because they know nations go to war, and they know when nations go to war, civilians get killed, and they know that buildings get destroyed, and they know that people don't say nice things about their enemy. They don't compliment them. They don't say, oh, I love your hair. They say derogatory things about your hair. So I'm just saying, no, the answer is there are no other examples. The one example is what happened in Bosnia. But even there, they carved out one incident in Srebrenica, only the 8,000 people that were killed there. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed in the war, Serbian-Bosnian war, but they only carved out one piece. Why? Because in that one section, what did it do? It looked like the Serbians were pulling out men and boys, moving them into a section, concentrating them, like the Jews in the Holocaust, and killing civilians. It didn't look, they were not armed with, they were not firing on army installations. There was no command centers. There was no communication centers. There was no warehousing of weapons. The Serbians were not involved in a war. When Israel is targeting, it's always targeting something that has military significance and necessity. Again, a cache of weapons, launching pads, communication centers, command centers, high-value targets, terrorists. Yeah, I know, Evelyn. Civilians are in the building. I know, but they're not the target. The target are the armed combatants. The unarmed people, the civilians, are there as collateral damage. And under the laws of war, armed conflict, under the law, the manual of the laws, the manual of war, and under the additional protocols of the Geneva Convention, the rule is very clear. If you put civilians in harm's way, you bear responsibility for their death. You, not the person firing, you. If you put civilians in harm's way, again, the law of war manual, the laws of armed conflict, and the additional protocols to the Geneva Convention all have the same rule. If you're operating next to civilians, if you're using them as shields, if you're putting them near weapons, right, in either to shield you or to shield the weapons, you are responsible for their deaths. Now, why aren't your law professors in Holland saying that? Saying this is clear violations of international law, the use of the shields. So instead, what these clowns are saying is, oh, no, forget that. All that matters is the dead civilians. Yeah, but they're dead, Evelyn, because they were used as shields. That's why they're dead.
By Hamas.
By Hamas. So if you have a problem and you want to bring an action for genocide, bring it against Hamas. You can bring one. Right. But again, you know what I would say about that? It's still not genocide. Why? Because Hamas is in a war. Okay. They're committing war crimes against their own people, including firing rockets that kill their own people, because the rockets explode in Gaza. All those actions of killing their own people, either as human shields or, again, firing rockets that ultimately end up killing their own people, those can be in the category of war crimes because it's in the context of war. But again, the word genocide is a very extreme word, and it's deliberately chosen. And the people in Holland who have offered this libel against the Jewish people know this. They know this. If they watch this, they're going to go, shut that guy up. Shut him up, because he's making us look ridiculous. We've invented something that we, on our own, doesn't exist, and the world never did this in any other war. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Dresden. Do you know how many buildings that were destroyed? Now, according to Bartov and the Dutch scholars, that's genocide. They destroyed buildings. Do you know how many people were displaced? It's genocide. People were displaced. How many people were killed? Yeah, but they were killed in a war. And so the United States and Britain must have engaged in genocide. You have to go back. The same Dutch scholars need to go back and write articles redefining all those wars and saying Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the bombing of Dresden, all of that were genocidal acts because buildings were destroyed, people were displaced, and civilians were killed even in the context of war. And as I said to you before, no country will sign on for that. Only a bunch of clowns that don't have jobs that teach and are ripping off the university. Only them. I know you're smiling, and I'm not being harsh. I'm being truthful. These are clowns. I take being a scholar very seriously. I don't make things up. If you make things up, you're not a scholar. If you want to invent something because you hate Jews, you're not a scholar. You've lost whatever your PhD means. You're not using your PhD. You're using your hatred because you know that you've come up with something new that never existed before.
I'm not even sure about hatred. Who can look in their heads? But at least what we know.
Can you tell me what?
At least
help
what we
me
know.
with that.
Well,
what would it be? What would it be?
At least what? Well, at least what? These days you get a lot of reward in the academic
Ah,
environment if you are anti-Israel or,
good point.
yeah. So at
Good
least it's
point.
rewarding to have a position like that.
But to do
Um,
that, though, to do that, you know what you're doing is libeling people that Evelyn, your frame. Oh, it was frozen for a moment.
I'm sorry.
You're,
I'm sorry.
yeah. These Dutch scholars knew what happened to Jews and Israelis in Amsterdam when Ajax, the soccer team, played Maccabi. They knew, they saw the violence. So I don't see how you can just say, well, it's really a career move. They're trying to advance their career because they know that if you continue to scream words like genocide, it has consequences. It gives people the license, the expectation. As an act of justice, I can kill Jews. So that's why I'm saying I agree with you that they see this as advancing their careers. But I don't agree that it doesn't involve hatred of Jews because they know that it comes with grave costs. They know that it will give people a license and a justification to harm Jews because they will point to an academic in Amsterdam or any other of the nation countries, universities throughout Holland, and point to those academics and said, the Jews are committing genocide, so I have the right to kill the Jew on the street.
Right. Could you give us, please, an factual update about the International Court of Justice? What is it? You just explained that they're not alleging Israel with genocide,
Not
but
yet.
what is the status of what are they doing?
So there are two courts that people hear about. So let's be clear. There's the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which is connected to the United Nations and sits in The Hague. And the actions are taken against nation states, member states of the United Nations. It's the court of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice. The International Criminal Court also sits in The Hague, but it has a very different purpose. It goes against individuals. So that's why this is the first time the leaders of a democratic country, Israel, have had their leaders indicted for crimes under the ICC. Because never before in other instances, they were not democratic societies. Again, very dangerous stuff. And if I was a Dutch prime minister, I'd be worried, right? If I was any democratic leader, I'd be worried. This is very dangerous precedent. It says that if I'm in a war and a lot of people get killed, the ICC can come after me personally because I'm the leader of Holland or I'm the leader of Switzerland. Very dangerous stuff. And I can assure you, the leaders of these Western societies know this. They know that everyone's playing with fire, calling something that isn't what it is in order to make it permissible to kill Jews and demonize the Israelis. The ICJ member states bring the action. South Africa brought the case against Israel, and Ireland joined it as an additional party. And that case is being brought. And maybe those academics in Holland will testify, but they will be in the end. So when there was a preliminary ruling a year and a half ago, I think her name was Joan Donoghue, who was the outgoing former president of the ICJ. She said, we don't like what we see in Gaza, which is what you said. I don't. Who likes what you see? Nobody likes what you see. Who wants to see anyone killed? I don't. I think you have to be accurate and fair in what you're pronouncing. So, but she said, at this point, from what we can see, there's no plausible argument of a genocide. What she didn't say is there might be war crimes, there might be crimes against humanity, there might be other things, but they're not genocide. And South Africa precipitously brought the most highest level crime you could bring to sensationalize the case. Mm-hmm. If South Africa, of all countries, had good faith, they would have said, look, this is a war. It's not a genocide, but we don't like the numbers that are being killed. It seems high to us. It seems high. We know the human shields. We don't know if Israel's doing enough to protect civilians. We are going to at least bring a war crimes case. Guess what, Evelyn? I wouldn't be here now. You would have called me and I would have said, Evelyn, I love you. You're great. But I don't think I have anything to say because maybe Israel is committing war crimes. I don't know. At the end of the day, that could happen. Israel takes it very seriously. They punish their own soldiers for actions like this. Hamas doesn't. I'm not going to tell you here on your podcast that there aren't war crimes. I don't know. I just know it's not a genocide. So where is that? It's still progressing. My guess is they will not conclude genocide for the reasons I said before. A, it doesn't meet the legal standard, and B, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for any country that has to go to war if Israel is being condemned or convicted of genocide.
Right. I think you made really clear to us why, from a legal standpoint, you cannot call this genocide what Israel is doing in Gaza. You could call it many other things if you want, but not a genocide, which is the most loaded term about doing things immoral or inhuman. You made that very clear to us, Thane. I have one last question to you.
Sure.
What can we do, or what should we do about this allegation that is constantly expressed against Israel, that Israel is committing genocide, which is so demonizing?
Well, aside from what we're doing is capitulating to terrorists, showing terrorists that they can be rewarded for committing acts of barbarism, because that's what we're doing. We're sending a very bad message. And if I were you, especially if I was in Holland, you're not. If I was in Holland or Sweden, I would be very scared because you have very large numbers of Islamists throughout Europe. Mm-hmm. You have an Islamist problem. Mm-hmm. Good luck to you, Evelyn. If you're providing a license for what happened on October 7th, it's going to happen to your daughters. They're going to look at Swiss daughters and they're going to say, infidels, I'm going to gang rape them. Allah said I can. They're not Muslim women. I can cut off their breasts. They did it in Israel. They did it in Israel. And you know what the world did? They gave the Palestinians a state. They gave them a gift. They called Israel committing genocide. They didn't focus on what happened on October 7th. They focused on Israel. So good luck to you, Evelyn. Good luck to Europe, because you've now provided a great justification to do the same thing in your country under the banner of Islam. So one thing you should do is not capitulate to barbarism, to say we stand for Western values and democratic ideals, and you don't. So you're either going to understand a way to somehow find some coherence, synergy between your religion and faith and our secular societies, or you have to go. You must go, because it would be untenable for you to stay here. That's something, my advice to Europeans. If you can stay, if you can be with us and recognize this is a different society, if you believe in Sharia law being strictly adhered to, you do not belong in Western Europe. That's number one. Number two, the same people who should be worried about what I just said should also be saying, we have to step in here. And despite what these Jew-hating Dutch professors say, people of goodwill would say, this is very dangerous to throw around words like genocide. It's very dangerous. Let me give you an example. There's a woman who works at the UN. I don't know her name. She's from Kenya. She would have had a name would have difficult for me to pronounce, but she's a hero in my mind. She was on a genocide committee in the United Nations. She's from Kenya. She's not Jewish. She's African. She was fired from her job because she was the only one on the committee who said that the charges of genocide against Israel before our court, the International Court of Justice, is wrong. And it's dangerous. That's what she said. It's wrong. It's dangerous to all of us. It's dangerous because it does two things. A, it trivializes real genocide. It takes real genocide and it brings it down.
Yeah.
Instead of treating it for what it is, the worst of the worst of the worst. And secondly, it makes every other country potentially culpable of genocide. Fired.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah.
Go. If you read my new book, you can find her name. She's a hero. Somebody should send her a letter, saying, we adore you. You are a hero. Fired. And she's not Jewish. She's African. She's from Kenya. And she said, this is not what we should be doing. So I'm saying people of goodwill and good faith should recognize that when words matter, that's definitions matter, legal elements and standards matter. That's what I said to you before. Would you be comfortable if I diminished other laws? If I did what the Dutch academics did? I said, well, that's not murder. It's just murder if you look somebody the wrong way. And also I heard you said something derogatory. It's death. Your death penalty for you, right? So I just think that people should be taking very seriously. Words matter, definitions matter, holding people to a high standard matters, and that eventually this capitulation, this surrender to barbarism is going to snap back at the Western countries. We are going to become vulnerable to this kind of thing, and we will be afraid to say anything because we now have created a precedent with Israel. And we know that we told Muslims, we told them what we did with Israel, we told them that you can accuse us of the same crimes, that you can accuse us of Islamophobia. You can accuse us because we learned a lesson. Thank you very much, Switzerland. Thank you very much. You taught us a lesson that we can now charge you with what Israel did to us. If you touch us, if you look at us the wrong way, if you insult us, if you humiliate us, if you do anything to us, we will scream genocide. And this is a very serious thing that the world is not accepting and they're not embracing. You're playing with fire. You may hate Jews, but do you hate them that much? How much do you really hate them that you're willing to risk something like this happening to your societies?
That is a very, maybe it's not a new perspective, but a perspective that I hardly hear in the media, that being so easy with this allegation of genocide toward Israel will backfire to all of us in the West, Jewish or not Jewish. I thank you for that, Thane, and I thank you for all the clarity and insights you gave us in this interview.
Well, thank you, Evelyn. I'm happy to be here. I hope it went well. And I hope the Dutch scholars that I humiliated, I hope they watch this. And I hope that they feel obligated to respond because no one is forcing them to respond. And the reason I said clowns a lot is I'm trying to get their attention. I want them to respond. Try to explain to people what you mean, because you're not telling them the truth. You needed to make up a new crime that doesn't already exist. And if you at least admitted that to people, they would go, oh, well, that's not really genocide. That's something else. It may be genocide, but it's not an actual definition. And the fact that Bartov didn't do that and the people that and one last thing. This is why Bartov complained about why aren't the Holocaust scholars? Remember you said the scholars agree. And I said, no, Evelyn, not the Holocaust scholars. And he complained, where are they? You know where they are, Evelyn? They're saying our job is to teach the Holocaust, preserve its memory, and keep the standards of horror for what it was, the atrocity for what it was. War is here, atrocity is here. And if we are scholars of the Holocaust, we don't want to bring this down to this. We want to keep it here. It's an atrocity, not a war. And that's why they don't agree with him. They don't agree with him because they don't want to trivialize the thing that they got their PhD for. They're paid to teach the Holocaust. And he has trivialized what happened. And they won't accept that, nor should they.
Thank you again, Thane. About your new book, when is it gonna be released and what will be the title?
It is released.
Oh,
Thank
it's
you for
released?
mentioning.
Yeah.
It is released. It's called Beyond Proportionality.
Oh, that's
Is Israel's just war in Gaza. And it takes you through everything I just said. The Geneva Conventions, the law of war manuals, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the laws of international humanitarian law, the laws of armed conflict. It basically takes you through this and shows you that the charges against Israel are baseless. And if you want to be able to respond to people that are screaming at you, buy and read my book, and then very calmly explain the rules and the law.
That's very good to know. For those of you who want to know more about this podcast, Never Again Is Now podcast, you can look us up at Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, at our podcast channels there. Look at Never Again Is Now podcast. We also would recommend you to look at, to watch and listen to other episodes we had recently or longer in the past. They're all on the channel. And we hope to see you back in the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evelyn.